Hello everyone. I am so honored to be here today at the Anne's Hidden Face show, a special stage where we have the opportunity to open up and share real stories from our lives and life events. This is a chance for me to recount memorable and emotional moments that I have kept hidden for a long time, in the hope that my story will touch your hearts. Hello everyone, my name is Anna, I am 30 years old, and I am currently single living in Georgia, USA. My life now is peaceful, but there is one thing that has troubled me for many years, a story that I have never dared to share with anyone. Today, after much thought, I have decided to tell that story not only to relieve my heart, but also to send a message of resilience, hoping that those who have gone through similar situations will feel sympathy. I still remember very clearly when I was a child, my family was very happy. We lived far from the city in a small house near the mountains, surrounded by peaceful and fresh nature. My mother was a capable woman, and my father was a wonderful man who loved his wife and children deeply. Our family's work mainly involved caring for livestock and selling meat to the city. Those peaceful days went by like that until one fateful day when everything changed. It was a winter day, snow was everywhere. That day, my father was driving a truck carrying meat to the city, as usual. However, the mountain road was slippery and an accident occurred. The truck lost control while going downhill and skidded off the road. My father tried to brake, but it was in vain, and then both the truck and my father plunged into the abyss. The bad news came that afternoon when the locals informed my mother. I still remember the moment my mother burst into tears, her face streaked with tears when she realized that her husband was gone forever. My father was a wonderful man, not only the breadwinner but also a source of inspiration for us. His sudden death left a huge void in my mother's and my heart. My mother was devastated, and our lives were turned upside down. I was only 15 at the time, too young to fully understand the loss, and I couldn't help my mother through this shock because I was struggling with the loss of the father I had always loved. As time passed, my mother gradually recovered and tried to continue her life. To avoid facing loneliness, my mother met an older man, and after some time they decided to marry. At first, I didn't oppose it too much because I thought my mother might need someone by her side to share the burden of life. However, I still felt uneasy with the presence of my new stepfather, and the awkwardness between us was inevitable. My mother had gone through a long period of loneliness after my father passed away. At that time, I was just nearly 15, too young to help her with heavy work. We lived in a rural area far from the city, and the people around us were few and far between. The lonely life and the burden of making a living made my mother more and more tired. I could feel the emptiness in her heart every day, even though she always tried not to show it to me. One day, my mother met a man who was about the same age as my father. He was a calm and composed person, and after a while of getting to know each other, my mother decided to marry for the second time. This decision of hers made me a bit confused, but I understood that she needed a companion to share her life. However, I couldn't deny that having a new stepfather made me feel strange and unfamiliar. At first, I kept my distance from him, not communicating much because to me he was still a stranger. Gradually, though, I began to accept my stepfather's presence in my life. He was a calm and thoughtful person, always trying to help my mother with the livestock and the daily work. The relationship between him and I was a bit awkward at first, but when my mother saw that we started talking and getting closer, she was very happy. She felt that our family was becoming more complete and happier. And that was what made me feel at ease. When I turned 16, my body began to change, becoming more mature and feminine. At that age, I was not yet fully aware of how my appearance and style of dress might affect others. I was still naive and had little knowledge of how people, especially adults, might perceive the appearance of a growing teenager. At that time, my mother often went out to work in the fields to take care of the livestock, and I stayed at home with my stepfather. We lived in an area quite far from the city. Not many people passed by, so I often wore simple, comfortable clothes, not paying too much attention to dressing modestly. I didn't think much about these things because for me it was just the usual way of dressing at home. Many times my stepfather and I sat together watching television, and I felt comfortable sitting close to him. I didn't think there was anything to be cautious about in these actions because at that time I was too naive to understand the relationships between men and women. For me, sitting close or having intimate conversations with family members was completely normal. One day, while my mother went to work in the fields tending the cattle, I stayed home with my stepfather. It was a normal day like any other. I wore a short skirt and a comfortable t-shirt, not caring much about what I wore because I always felt safe in the familiar space of my home we sat together watching television, a normal habit between two people in the family at that time. I did not realize that there were things in family relationships that needed to be maintained with respect and propriety. I sat carefree next to my stepfather while watching TV, not thinking about anything else than enjoying my free time. My stepfather kept turning around in an uncomfortable manner without me knowing, and then I realized that my stepfather had taken off all his clothes without me knowing. After a while, my stepfather started to behave inappropriately with me and my father, so I asked him what he was doing. My father just answered with a trembling voice and said, "It was okay, daughter." And then my stepfather started to behave inappropriately. I started to feel pain down there and told him to stop. I couldn't take it anymore, but my stepfather didn't stop there and continued even more until a point when my body was tired. I collapsed. I couldn't describe the pain, and it was the first time with my experienced stepfather making me unable to walk. Right after the inappropriate behavior between my stepfather, after a while I stood up and walked, feeling pain but also a bit of excitement in it. After living with my mother and stepfather for a while, I began to feel that things in the family were not the same as before. Although my mother always loved and cared for me, I had indescribable feelings in my heart that I could not share with anyone. I could not ignore the unusual signs in the relationship between me and my stepfather. I grew up in a rather isolated environment, living in the countryside far from the city, where people were friendly, but there was also very little contact with the outside world. During that time, I often told myself that what I felt was probably just the imagination of a growing girl who did not fully understand life and relationships. However, the feeling of alienation and steadfastness grew inside me. I began to notice a change in the way my stepfather treated me, even though on the surface it was still normal like any other family. When my mother was away and my stepfather and I were home together, I began to feel that something was wrong. I felt uncomfortable but couldn't pinpoint the cause. At first I told myself that it was just me growing up, and the changes in my emotions and body made things more confusing, but gradually I realized that while family love is important, there are boundaries that everyone in the family needs to respect. I started thinking about how to get out of a situation where I didn't feel safe, not because I wanted to get away from my family, but because I felt like something was wrong and I needed to do something to protect myself. Even though I loved my mother very much and didn't want her to worry, I realized that keeping quiet would only make things worse. After much soul-searching and analyzing my inner feelings, I decided that the best thing for me was to leave the house I had lived throughout my childhood. I realized that creating some distance from my stepfather, although difficult, was necessary to keep the family relationship from going any further in a negative direction. At that time, I decided to go to the city to continue my studies. Moving to a new place not only gave me the opportunity to be exposed to the outside world, but also gave me time to understand myself and the relationships around me better. I knew that my mother would not accept this decision easily, but I believed that it was the right step to protect myself and maintain balance in the family. After moving to the city, I gradually found peace of mind. I started to integrate into my new life, met new friends, and focused on my studies. Gradually, I realized that building an independent and self-reliant life not only helps me avoid awkward situations but also helps me grow mentally and emotionally. From these experiences, I have learned that each of us has the right to set boundaries to protect ourselves no matter the situation. If you feel unsafe or insecure, listen to your inner feelings and seek appropriate solutions. Family is important, but so is your own safety and well-being. Now looking back, I am grateful for the decision to move away. It not only helped me escape from my insecurities but also gave me the opportunity to become independent, learn to be stronger and more confident. I know that not everyone can easily face complicated situations in life, but sometimes choosing to leave and build a new life is the best thing to do to protect yourself and the people you love. After many years, I have grown up and clearly realized that my stepfather's towards actions me were wrong. What happened in my youth left deep mental and emotional scars in me. I understand that when I was young I was not able to clearly identify everything, but now as an adult I understand that what I went through was not right. It was deeply imprinted in my mind, creating a haunting that even after many years I still cannot forget. Whenever I look back, I feel so guilty and heartbroken, not only because of what happened but also because I don't know how to make amends, especially to my mother. My mother is a kind, loving, and caring woman, but I don't have the courage to tell her what happened. I'm afraid that if she knew the truth it would destroy her happiness and possibly destroy the family she worked so hard to build. Now at 36 years old, although I have a life of my own and have settled down in the city, memories of the past still haunt me. My mother and stepfather still live in the old house near the mountains where I grew up. My mother seems happy, and I don't want to hurt her by revealing things from the past that I have kept secret for so many years. Every time I think about it, I feel conflicted between wanting to protect my mother and feeling Guilty for keeping it from her for so long. I tell this story, not to seek sympathy or pity, but to hope that, through my experience, you can understand the importance of setting boundaries and protect yourself in all relationships. Even in the family, sometimes seemingly normal things can have profound consequences affecting our entire lives. I hope that everyone who is reading this will avoid similar situations and not let anything happen in their family. Always listen wrong to your feelings, seek support when you need it, and never be afraid to set wise boundaries. Only then can we maintain healthy, positive relationships without leaving scars on our souls. This is my story, and I hope that through this story you will learn how to protect yourself and keep your family safe, as well as other relationships in life.